Let's talk about clicker training. So clicker training has gained a little bit of popular media and attention lately, and I think for good reason, because the more I use clicker training, the more I like it. I was a little bit skeptical of it at first, but the more I tried it, the more I liked it. So stay tuned here in this video, and we're going to talk a little bit about why you might want to try clicker training too and how to get started. So essentially, there are two types of training. There is positive reinforcement and there is negative reinforcement. And despite their names, one is not necessarily inherently better or worse. Negative reinforcement is the idea of pressure and release. And this is what the vast majority of horse training is based on since pretty much the beginning of time. So this is the idea: you put your leg on, the horse moves forward, you take your leg off, the horse gets the reward. This is pretty common. All of us probably have used this, and this is really often the language that most horses use with each other, especially when they're trying to create some space or assert their whatever. If they're trying to eat some food and another horse is coming, you'll see them kind of use this pressure and release method of communication with each other. Now, pressure and release is based on the cortisol system. So you add pressure, the horse feels stress, their body releases cortisol, the cortisol pressure pushes them to make some decision or do some sort of behavior. The behavior is performed, you relieve the pressure, the cortisol goes down, the horse feels good vibes, and then learns to do this behavior in order to avoid the cortisol spike. It's a long-winded way of saying pressure, stress, behavior, relieves pressure, and then the horse learns. Now, positive reinforcement, on the other hand, is based on skipping the cortisol part and just rewarding the behavior that we like. So, for example, if we're trying, one of my favorite ways to use positive reinforcement is teaching a horse to stand at the mounting block. So if you're trying to teach your horse to stand the mounting block and they pull up next to it, and then they do that little shift away and you can't reach to get on, the negative reinforcement, or the classic model, would be to get off and shift them back and then release the pressure and then go get on the horse. What ends up happening though, if any of you have ever tried to do this, is you end up in this: get on the block, your horse shifts, you get off the block, you push the horse back, get back on the block, your horse shifts, and you are stuck in this shifting cycle. Or sometimes people will use the method of lunging the horse around the mounting block, and then when the horse finally decides to stand, then they stop lunging the horse, and that's how the horse learns to stand at the block. But both of these are a little bit long-winded, and neither of them really always seem to be effective with all horses. However, for positive reinforcement, what you would do is when the horse pulls up next to the block, they get a treat, or use a clicker, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and you'll click and the horse knows then that that is the reward. They did their correct job and now they're getting rewarded for that. This is a major shortcut because when used correctly, it can really teach a horse a behavior that they're already doing and reinforce that behavior. Another example would be you can teach a horse with positive reinforcement to self-halter or to do cooperative eye cleaning, or all of these things that would just be incredibly difficult, if not impossible, with negative reinforcement. Because how do you push a horse to put their halter on with pressure? It doesn't really make a lot of sense. But with positive reinforcement, you hold the halter out, the horse puts their nose in the hole, they get a treat. They're like, hey, I get a treat if I put my nose in that hole. I'm going to do that more often. Okay, so that's the basics of positive versus negative reinforcement. So now where does the clicker come in? The clicker we use to train the horse to feel the positive reinforcement from the sound of a click. And I actually don't have a clicker with me right now, or I would use that as an example. But really, the clicker itself is sort of arbitrary. You could use any device or sound or word or whatever, as long as every time it's the same. So I've even seen people go and that's their click, and so because they don't like to hold a device, and that's fine. You could also say good, you could say yes, whatever your thing is that you want your horse to know means they did the right thing. And essentially what you're going to do is you're going to spend a few days, just a couple of times a day for a couple of minutes at a time. You're going to click this clicker or say your word or whatever the reward mechanism is at the same time that you give your horse a treat. Now there's a couple important things here. One is that these happen at the exact same moment so that the horse's brain starts to associate that sound with the good vibes and the positive affirmations, right? The second thing is you only give the treat and click if your horse is standing still and they're not grabbing for the treat. This is where a lot of people go wrong with clicker training, and it's the very first step. The reason people go wrong is because the horse starts to realize that when they hear that click, they're going to get a treat, and they start to lurch and grab for the treat before it's time. And what we really want to teach the horse is that we will bring the treat to you. You stand very still and you wait for that treat to hit your lips before you eat it. If your horse starts to lurch and grab, session over, no more treats, we're done. The only time your horse gets a treat, cannot say this enough, is when they stand still, look straight ahead, mind their own business, then you're going to click and reward. Because even that is training your horse that when they're polite, they get the reward. When they're pushy, no reward. So this is the very first step in positive reinforcement training and clicker training. Once you've done this for a few days, your horse is going to start to associate the sound of the click or the word or whatever you're choosing as positive reinforcement because their brain is now wired to associate the treat with that sound. So what that means is now you can start to ask your horse for behaviors. You're going to use the click and then you're going to treat shortly after. But the click itself is the reward at this point. Again, we're going to make sure that we're always bringing the treat to the horse and the horse is never reaching for the treat. Very important. You will start first with doing this mechanism of clicking and treating with a behavior that your horse already knows. So a lot of people will choose to do this with leading. They'll take a step forward, the horse walks with them, they'll click, they'll treat. They'll back, the horse backs, they click, they treat. So the idea is to start using it with things your horse already knows so that they can again then begin to build the association. When I do the right thing, I get a click and then I get a treat. And then it's from there, fair game. You can do anything. Any behavior that you can either catch your horse doing or that you can encourage them to do, you can then click and treat. So that's a really, really basic outline of why we want to clicker train and how to clicker train. There's some horses that are a little bit more inclined to clicker train than others. I like to use clicker training with horses that lack confidence because it's a really great way to build confidence really quickly. I also like to use clicker training with younger horses or more curious horses because they're, again, more inclined to be seeking those rewards. And then I also like to use it with horses that have had any kind of trauma or abuse because they're probably already flooded with cortisol, so using pressure and release, therefore, doesn't really necessarily do a whole lot because it's not really relieving cortisol. So what we're really trying to do here is focus on the horses that, or in the behaviors that we can catch them in good behavior or encourage them into good behavior or lead them into good behavior and then give them that reward to then encourage more of that behavior. This isn't necessarily helpful unless you really know what you're doing for retraining bad behavior. It totally is possible, and I encourage you to keep practicing because you will get to that point. But until your timing is really, really good and your eye for horse behavior is really, really good, this is where sometimes clicker training gets a bad rap because people will try to use it and they'll use it just slightly wrong and they'll teach the wrong behavior. So going back to that mounting block idea, if you click and treat when your horse looks for the treat, you're going to teach your horse to look for that treat, but when their nose comes around to the left to get the treat, where does their hind end go? Away from you. So we're inadvertently teaching the horse not to stand when what we're trying to do is teach the horse to stand. So again, going back to your timing has to be good, and you have to only give that treat when your horse doesn't acknowledge you. The treat comes when your horse looks straight ahead and continues minding their business and working on their behavior. Super important to keep clean clicker training hygiene there. It's also, again, the timing thing is so important. Going back to the haltering idea, if you hold up your halter and your horse puts their nose in the hole and you click right at that moment, that's the behavior that's getting rewarded. But if your horse puts their nose in the hole and then pulls their nose back out and then you click, guess what got rewarded? Taking their nose out of the hole. So now you're teaching your horse not to halter instead of to halter. So again, these are all things that are fixable. They're all things like no big deal, especially, once you get a little bit of practice, you'll be able to fix a lot of these. But I highly encourage you to start with things that you can really clearly see the correct timing and click right at the exact moment that your horse does that behavior. If you miss the opportunity, just wait. Don't try to click after the fact. Redo, erase, start again, and then try to click at the moment of the behavior you're trying to reinforce. If this is something that you're interested in, please leave a comment below so that I know to make more videos like this one. Also, please make sure to like and subscribe and check out more educational content on my YouTube channel, on Instagram at Ruby Doss Equine, as well as at rubydossequine.com. I have some really exciting things in the pipeline for you, including some online courses. I do a lot of in-person workshops, including I'm getting ready to do Clicker Training 101 in person. So if you're not in the local area, or if you're seeing this after the first week of February, I'm sorry. But if you would like to see a virtual workshop version of this, please comment below so that I know to prioritize that on my to-do list, because I think just making this information more available to people to watch asynchronously or in different locations is really important, because my biggest mission is to help you to learn to be the best horse person that you can be, to take better care of yourself and take better care of your horse. So anything that I can do to make that happen, I am motivated to do. So anyway, I appreciate the like and the subscribe and the comments, and I will see you in the next video.